Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to New Funding Opportunities Breakout session here at the SOAR Summit. I'm so excited that you're going to be joining us all for a riveting, dare I say, panel discussion about current, reoccurring, and anticipated funding opportunities that you should know about in order to fuel your economic development initiatives in Appalachian, Kentucky. My name is Mieka Sanderson, and I'm a program analyst at the Appalachian Regional Commission, working in our Business and Workforce Investment Grants Division. So as Appalachian Kentucky continues to collaborate and innovate to create new opportunities, it's important to understand the various forms of funding currently available and anticipated to help drive that transformative change. So we've assembled a formative panel to provide you with key funding opportunities and best practices you should consider as you look to jumpstart or continue your economic development initiatives in the area. So today we are joined by Dennis Keene, Commissioner for the Kentucky Department for Local Government, Hilda Legg, U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development State Director for Kentucky, as well as Rebecca Goodman, Secretary of the Kentucky Energy Cabinet. I'll be serving as your moderator for today's session. So before we hop into introducing our panelists a bit more formally and having you understand a little bit more about their background, I wanted to talk about the format for today's discussion. So after introductions, I will in fact ask a few questions of the panel. And then I plan on opening it up to audience Q&A. We really want this to be an interactive opportunity for you all to raise questions for the panelists that we'll be talking with today. So as a question pops in your mind, please be sure to use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen to submit your question. As time permits, I'll try to ask as many questions as possible. I anticipate my questions for the panel may last about 20 minutes or so, perhaps 30. And then the rest of the time, we really would love to hear from you all and the questions that you'll have. One thing to note is that we will have a pretty firm stop at about 2:28 p.m. And that's because our next plenary begins at 2:30 p.m. and the system will automatically route us to the main virtual stage. So we just want to make sure that we have ample time to properly wrap up this session. So without further ado, I'm going to start off by reading the bio for Commissioner Keene. So with a background in business development and state government, Commissioner Keene is no stranger to improving Kentucky communities. Equipped with an entrepreneurial spirit, he started a business at 20 before becoming a top advisor at Regional Economic Development Group, South Bank Partners. Commissioner Keene has also represented the 67th District in the Kentucky House of Representatives from 2005 to 2019. During his tenure, he served on the House Licensing and Occupations Committee, was the caucus chairman in House leadership, and passed over 100 pieces of legislation. Commissioner Keene uses his strategic planning experience to help local governments find creative solutions for community problems through strategy, collaboration, and funding opportunities with the goal of improving access and opportunity for every Kentucky family. Hilda Legg was appointed by the Donald J. Trump administration as U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development State Director for Kentucky in November 2017. Now serving under her fourth president, Ms. Legg brings vast knowledge and a wide variety of skills from experience in public, nonprofit, and private industries. Ms. Legg started her career as a teacher in Adair County schools before serving in Ronald Reagan's Department of Education. She went on to serve in various capacities focused on rural economic development in both Bush administrations. She also served as the first executive director and CEO at the Center for Rural Development in Somerset, Kentucky, and she owned a small business assisting community leaders and telecommunications providers with building broadband networks in rural America. A native of Adair County, Kentucky, where she is co-owner of a family farm, she currently resides in central Kentucky with her husband, Michael, and is the proud mother of a U.S. soldier. Energy and Environment Cabinet Secretary Rebecca Goodman was appointed as the state's top environmental officer in December 2019 by Governor Andy Beshear. Secretary Goodman has spent more than 4 decades in service to the Commonwealth. Through her work on both state and federal cases, Secretary Goodman regularly dealt with social and environmental justice issues that frequently involved low-income, disadvantaged, and residential customer needs. She has served as general counsel for the Kentucky Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, the Kentucky Executive Branch Ethics Commission, and the Kentucky Electric Generation and Transmission Siting Board. Secretary Goodman also has served as the executive director of the Office of Legal Services at the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet after beginning her career as a staff attorney for the Kentucky Public Service Commission. Secretary Goodman earned her Juris Doctor from Salmon P. Chase College of Law and her Bachelor of Science, Business Administration, magna cum laude from Kentucky State University. As you can see from these bios, we have a very prestigious group of individuals with us today. So I want to thank the panel for making time to talk with us about the funding opportunities that are available in their offices. So I'm proposing a warm virtual welcome at this time. So we will begin today's discussion with a few questions from me just to kind of warm up the audience and get them thinking about their own questions that they may have for you. But for folks who may not be as intimately familiar with the offices that each of you head up, I would love for you all to just briefly discuss the key activities of your offices or departments. And perhaps we can start with Secretary Goodman and then State Director Legg and then Commissioner Keene.
Thank you very much, Mieka. The Energy and Environment Cabinet has within its under its roof, I should say, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Department of Natural Resources, and several offices having to do with energy and other matters. We, in addition to being a regulatory agency, we also do have several different ways that we, in keeping with our mission, can help public agencies, and even private developers move on to help us clean up environmental challenged properties. I'm going to say they're not all contaminated, and I hate to use that word, but old gas stations, reclaimed mine sites, old dry cleaning establishments, things like that. So we have quite a few funding opportunities within the agency to clean up brownfields. We work very closely with FEMA on several different types of financing. There's BRIC grants that are going to come through here pretty soon. The Department of Natural Resources, of course, deals with all things coal, something near and dear to most Eastern Kentuckians right now, the economy being in a downturn, and all of the coal bankruptcies are something that we're very much involved with right now. So we also have the Office of Energy Policy, which is pretty exciting and spends most of its time trying to hook people up, private developers, public, quasi-public, schools, state agencies, everyone, trying to hook them up with whatever their energy needs are. So that's it, I guess, in a nutshell.
Perfect. State Director Legg.
Well, good afternoon. Mieka, are you on 1666 Connecticut Avenue?
I am not. I am on 2nd Street,
Okay,
Northwest DC.
Well, it's so nice to meet you, a fellow ARC person, and to our Secretary Goodman and to Commissioner Keene. I'm honored to be with you on this panel today. Of course, I first want to just acknowledge and express my appreciation to Congressman Hal Rogers and to Governor Andy Beshear for hosting this SOAR summit. COVID has made it difficult for all of us and continues to wreck my agenda for tomorrow, but so we'll move forward and we'll figure it out some way. But thank you for the opportunity to talk about rural development. I'm pretty passionate about it. In one way or the other, I've been involved in rural economic development for over 35 years. And at the agency of USDA has a rural development office in 47 states, New Hampshire and Vermont are together, and Rhode Island, New Jersey together, but 47 of us state directors. And our job is to help manage your tax dollar, your taxes that are paid to Washington, that members of Congress appropriate to USDA in rural development activities, that we in turn try to bring back to the individuals, the families, and taxpayers that live in rural communities across the country. For me, I'm particularly focused on how much of that USDA rural development money can I bring back to Kentucky. And I have a great staff that helps me do that. But we partner frequently with Commissioner Keene's folks, obviously ARC, we have a great relationship with, but EDA, CDBG, takes all of our resources. As Secretary Goodman mentioned, the declining coal industry, Eastern Kentucky has just been hit exceptionally hard in the past decade. So what can we do, and how can we help those families to survive? How do we help attract young people to stay there? And so rural development has been around for a long time, and its mission really hasn't changed. A few new programs here and there, a little bit more in that pot of money than the last time, based on the priorities of each administration. But I boil it down to this: the ABCs of rural development. A is affordable housing. If you have someone who's looking to buy a new home, but maybe doesn't have a down payment, needs some preferable interest rates, then you should visit one of our offices and talk to one of our single family housing staff. We also fund multifamily housing, low income units, 435 of them across the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So housing, that's the A. The B is business, small business to large business. We can make a $15 million loan. We can make a $5,200 grant to our agribusiness, our small business, anyone who would want to improve their energy efficiency, something I'm sure that Secretary Goodman is interested in. We have a special pot of money. We could even help you as a small business convert to energy saving light bulbs, to LED lighting, to put photovoltaic solar systems on your business. I was at a poultry farm in West Kentucky the other day. They had installed some solar system on the roofs of their brooder houses, and he was saying that it saves him $400 a month on his electric bill. So that is, and it's a way people don't think necessarily of rural development, but that's the way we help the business community, whether it's agribusiness or a manufacturing, invest in that business and get a greater return on their dollar, save money, create jobs, make a profit. So we're very interested in our business communities, and particularly those that are in our agriculture arena and in our small businesses in our rural towns. Then the C is for community programs. That's probably the one that most people think about, in that we do all the sewer systems. We do buildings, libraries, hospital loans, grants. We also provide for our infrastructure of broadband. We now have an emphasis we can do for the first time. We've never really done transportation. And by that, I mean adding a new hangar in Russell County on their airport. Very different. But when it comes to my favorite infrastructure program, it would have to be telecommunications and broadband. The congressman mentioned a project that we just announced in Eastern Kentucky to People's Rural yesterday, a $5 million loan grant and additional Community Connect grants. So it was a great investment because it is so expensive to build out high-speed broadband. Where farm to market roads were truly the connectivity in the past, it is now the information highway. But because of our rural demographics that are more spread out, not all of our residents in the SOAR region, Eastern Kentucky, really want to be online at high-speed connectivity, or they don't want to pay that cost of that. So it's a balancing act between finding the money to build the network in a place where they're going to have enough customers that are willing to pay the price of that connectivity in order for them to make a business case. So rural infrastructure is very important to us, and the information highway is critically important to the future. We believe also in our distance learning and telemedicine, and particularly with COVID-19, it's really raised that. The CARES Act gave us additional money, $100 million addition for broadband, and $25 additional million for connectivity and distance learning and telemedicine. So We're very proud of the grants that we have been selected. We had 7 out of 116. So we did better than most of the other states when we were able to bring those home. So the way you need to just think about rural development is this. If your community has a need, then come talk to us. If it's a business, talk to us. If it's a facility that you need in your town, come talk to us. If it's a family that needs a new home, come talk to us. We may not always have the answer. We may not have enough grant money for you. We do a lot of loans, low interest, long terms, make it economically feasible. $1 billion new dollars in our rural business program from the CARES Act. Kentucky has led the nation with our businesses investing in that in terms of using that CARES Act. So any part of rural communities, and some, you say, what is rural? Well, we have about 5 definitions of rural at USDA. Some is 5,000 and under for the old electric program. That's 10,000 and under for our water, 20,000 population and under for our broadband, up to 50,000 and under for many of our guaranteed loans, business and CF. So basically, we'd love to talk with you about any vision, any hope, any ideas that you have for your community and your families in rural Kentucky. And thank you.
Thank you, State Director Legg. Commissioner Keene?
Thank you. The Department for Local Government is part of the Governor's Office and provides financial help in the way of grant and loan assistance, as well as advising local governments in matters of budget, personnel, and other issues relevant to the local entities. Currently, DLG has several options for funding within our agency. Many of you are aware of the one that affects the Appalachian region, which is what we call ARC. This program is especially particular to Eastern Kentucky and provides funding for projects which will help to improve the economical and physical health of every citizen in the area. Community development block grants are divided into several different areas, including economic development, public facilities, public services, among others. Several deadlines have already passed, but there are still monies available in certain project areas. Economic development, housing, public service are still available, and the deadline on those applications is February 28th of 2021. One of the programs that we use quite a lot of is Recreational Trail programs. It provides assistance for acquisition of easements, development, and or maintenance of recreational trails, motorized and non-motorized. Cities and county governments, as well as state and federal agencies, can request a maximum of $250,000 for their project. This grant requires a 50-50 match and is funded through the Federal Highway Administration. When they say 50-50, it's half of the $250,000 would be required. Land and Water Conservation Funds provides federal funds to protect natural areas, acquire land for outdoor recreational activities, and to develop and renovate public outdoor recreational facilities. This program may be used to help renovate swimming, boating, and fishing facilities, as well as trails, natural areas, and passive parks. The grant program is funded through the National Park Service and requires an 80-20 match. Case in point, we put a boat dock on Cave Run Lake. The maximum request is $250,000 for each project. Local government economic assistance funding, that utilizes a revenue sharing program for counties and cities that returns a portion of the state collected coal and non-coal minerals to eligible local governments. Local Government Economic Development Fund is what you know as single and multi-county coal funds. Funds are allocated in the Commonwealth's budget for projects in coal-producing counties, if funding is available. Grants are made from this program to assist eligible counties in diversifying their local economy beyond coal production and meet other community development. The thing is that the fiscal courts, we really don't have, we're a pass-through. So the fiscal courts, like local communities, have to say so on the spending and needs of that money. Area development funds are a coordinated effort between your local area development districts, DLG for capital project funding, which contributes to community or industrial development. You know, I could take hours talking about the magnitude of programs that our agency has to offer local governments in your area. We pride ourselves in customer service. We call our customers our service we provide to people. So we look forward to hearing from you and anything that we can do to make your community stronger and better and more economical, vibrant. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Keene. And you know,
I'm hearing a little
feedback. So if we could just make sure to mute when we're not talking, that would be perfect. But I was just thinking, you know, Commissioner Keene actually started to share some very specific pots of funding that are available and what they are used for. So at this time, I would love Secretary Goodman or State, you know, if you can name some very specific grant funding that is offered through your particular office, who's eligible, you know, around when is that available? I think, and what can that funding be used for? I think that would be great to share with our audience. So Secretary Goodman, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Oh, I have several that I'd love to talk about. I think you all heard the governor and Congressman Rogers both talk about the abandoned minelands pilot program and the 2 grant awards to the 2 hospitals this morning. We have a pilot program, thanks to Congressman Rogers shepherding that $25 million through the federal budget that is released to our agency. And that is basically available to any community or any individual who has a project that has a nexus to historic mining. There are several rules for applying for that money. Right, and 25 million, you know, we had 71 projects valued at over 230 million this year. And so I'm having to select from those projects to figure out where that 25 million is going to go. But if you have a great idea to stimulate the economy, to have an industrial project, to infrastructure, to tourism, doesn't really matter. We'd love to hear from you. What we do, and what we did this year for the first time, was to contact the area development districts and work with them to set up some general sessions, webinars, teaching people about the AML program, telling them how to apply. The current round of funding, you know, we're in the process of selecting the projects, so the application process cut off August the 1st. But assuming that Congressman Rogers can get this money in the budget next year, we would like for everybody to start looking in the spring. They can go to our website for AML pilots. They can check with their area development districts, but we plan on using the same process. So that's, you know, we want those projects to do something for the local communities. And we look for a very direct nexus to it. We look for projects that are well designed, projects that, you know, have very clear steps, that have maybe matching funding that can be brought to the table as well. But we would love to have people apply for those. We also have several significant brownfield pots of money, as I mentioned before. We have the Cleaner Commonwealth Fund, which is loans and grants that can help with cleanup costs at brownfield properties. Those are for communities, for nonprofits, for quasi-governmental agencies, for private and other public agencies wishing to reuse a brownfield site. We have redevelopment and reuse program, which can help an applicant manage the liability, I guess is the best way to say that, associated with a brownfield property. The important thing, if you are considering a brownfield property, and that can be an abandoned and reclaimed mine site, mines, guard lands, dry cleaners, gas stations, etc. The important thing is to call the cabinet first and just ask for somebody to talk to you about brownfields, and we have several very qualified individuals who can do that. We also can help you perform a site assessment a phase one, which is necessary to qualify for any of those monies. We can help you get that done. So important thing is pick up the phone, talk to us first. The other area where we might have some pots of money that might be of interest is in the energy field. We have energy project assessment districts, EPAD or PACE financing. We can help you with green tariffs. We can help you with virtual PPAs, purchase power agreements, or shared solar opportunities. We also are looking and applying for some of the BRIC grants. That's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. And that's for fiscal year 2020. The Federal Energy Management Agency is going to distribute about $500 million through that BRIC program. And we are applying for a significant amount of that. That money we hope to use to incentivize public infrastructure projects, mitigate risk to essential services, incorporate nature-based solutions like restoring forests and wetlands, and work to adopt and enforce modern building codes. So that's just, basically a quick rundown of it, but I would encourage anybody who wants to gain additional information about this to go to eec.ky.gov. eec.ky.gov. You'll find these broken down into respective subject matter areas. There'll also be some contact information there. Pick up the phone, call us. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about them.
Thank you, Secretary Goodman. Such great, fantastic information. I hope audience members are furiously taking notes. I know a lot of this is verbal. State Director Legg, are there any particular grant opportunities that you think folks should be aware of as they are looking to fund their activities?
Well, sure. We have a lot of grants, and a lot of times we work with a loan grant combo. It's pretty difficult to break it down into exactly what you're looking at, because one thing is where you're located. We have an indices that we have to use, which is called median household income. So based on that median household income of a city or a county, which differs, or a census tract, if you're serving that, based upon that in our community facilities program, we would determine what percentage of grant that you would get out of a project. So if your project was $1 million project, in some communities you could get up to 75% grant. In some communities, you can only get 15% grant. So that is just an impossible thing to predict. And we have to look at that. And then also which pot of money. Now, we're talking about funding opportunities. I never want to presume to speak for the United States Congress, okay? So we are operating at the federal level on a continuing resolution. If we are funded at the normal levels that we usually are, and most likely would be some additional monies to respond to the COVID problems, then, in the last 3.5 years of the Trump administration, while I've been here, we have put over $3.2 billion in rural communities. So you think about that, that's a little over $1 billion, about $1 billion, just under $1 billion a year. So that's a lot of money. Now, all of that's not grant, some of it is loan. But we have to look at the project and where it's at to determine that. Another thing is that Congress gave us last year was an extra $7.6 million to invest along our rural community facility lines, which are for not-for-profits or for community governments. It can be local governments, cities, county, or not-for-profit entities. We cannot make a loan, unfortunately, with Secretary Goodman, we can't make them a loan or give them a grant for the state. We cannot do state entities, but local governments or not-for-profits. So that additional $7.6 million goes into disaster counties that were designated so by FEMA. And FEMA determined if there had been a tornado or there had been flooding. So in those counties, there's an extra pot of money. So it's kind of hard to say this county can go for this and this county can go for that. It really means reaching out to one of our field offices across the state, talking to our specialists. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. And they'll say, well, maybe we can help you with this or this loan or this grant. The other thing is some of our projects are competed at the national level. If we've got the grant money and your project meets that, and then we spend all of our grant money, you know, so the sooner you get your projects in, and there's an allocation of, you know, however many, 7 million or whatever, once we've allocated all that grant funds, then we are done for the year unless Washington goes and gives us more. And we do ask for that. And we usually do get extra money in our water program because we always have a lot of demand. We get our water projects in early. So we go back to what we call pool funding. But then at the end of the year, if we haven't spent our money, it goes back into the federal coffers. So the disaster grant money in our CF program does not do that. It stays with us. So if you have small projects in your communities, there's not a limit on it at this point, but we do an awful lot with emergency vehicles and police vehicles and those kinds of fire stations. Those are things that sometimes our local governments are just really struggle to pay for. And that's an easy grant percentage, 50%, 75, 35, whatever it is. But some of our projects actually compete at the national level. Our Community Connect that we just mentioned, that was a part of the broadband, they compete nationally. That's a much more difficult thing to do. That project has to show the need in that port of Kentucky, that community in Kentucky is great enough to receive that money coming here. Same thing I mentioned in our distance learning telemedicine, that we compete nationally for. So bringing home 7 of 116 means every state would have had a little over 2 apiece. So we brought home 7. So we go for getting our share and more, so to speak. But again, that competition is very serious. So DLT and Community Connect and some of our technical assistance, we do have technical assistance grants that we can give certain entities, feasibility studies that can be done. If you've got an idea in your community of what you think you're going to develop a priority on it, you want it to become known for X, Y, and Z in your recruiting industry, or you need to get an infrastructure in place, we can help with some of that small funding for feasibility studies, you know, 50,000, 75,000, something like that. So again, it's, as Secretary Goodman said, it's really hard to say this is exactly what we got, because it does, sometimes we compete nationally, sometimes we compete on the statewide, and then sometimes we go in and ask for more money to bring in. So again, I think it's just really important to stay in touch, to learn who your rural development person is for your county or your community. And we'll start there, and then we'll see how we can make your project a viable one. And we may need to go to Commissioner Keene and say, we need a little ARC money in with this project to make it work, or CDBG, HUD money into it. So we look for all those kinds of partnerships that we can put together and make that money have a stronger impact, less financial burden on our local rural communities. Our small towns and counties, they really, really struggle. And when you don't have the local businesses prospering and the tax, base growing, you're trying to provide all these services with a dwindling amount of local revenue. And they have some very, very tall mountains to scale in trying to provide services to our community people. And people live there. And that's our ultimate goal, is to keep our folks there. So this one other thing, I just looked down, think people wouldn't think about it, but I always tell all of my county judges and mayors this, because it's like, they go to those folks and ask for everything under the sun. You always call your judge or your mayor and see if they can do it. We have a small housing grant program. If you have an elderly couple or someone who needs their home to be more energy efficient, needs insulation, needs new windows, needs a new roof, needs a handicap walkway, we have some small grants that even would help those individuals make their homes a safer and healthier place. So again, it's really broad, and as the government, federal government, we are the worst at requiring paperwork. So whatever you do, again, you need one of our specialists to help you, because the paperwork is monumental. The regulations are very technical. So call our offices, and that's how we get started.
State Director Legg. And I think the theme that I'm hearing across the board is that folks reach out to your office to really understand the depth and breadth of what's available to them in terms of funding opportunities. Because right now in this conversation, we're just kind of scratching the surface, and it's really to just open people's eyes to the fact that there is money out there, but you really have to engage with each of your office's teams for folks to get access to everything that might be applicable to the work that they're trying to do. So that's very exciting to hear. I want to just remind audience members, please go ahead. If you have questions for our panelists, start to type those in the chat box. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I would love to start asking some of those audience Q&A questions. But if not, I could keep rolling with my questions, so that's no problem at all. So the last question that I had before I check to see if there are any audience questions was just, as a first-time applicant to any one of your funding opportunities, what advice would you give to those organizations or individuals? And I'm going to kick this question to Commissioner Keene first, and then probably Secretary Goodman, and then State Director Legg. So, Commissioner Keene?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. The first thing you probably want to do is, get somebody that can write a grant for you, and to also communicate with one of us and what you're wanting to do so that we can help you, because we're real good about that in our department. If you call up and you're not sure, just like Hilda said, we'll say, well, we can provide a pot of money over here through ARC, but you're not going to have enough to complete your project. You may have to go see Hilda over the rural area and you match it all up. We do that all the time, and it's just like putting a puzzle together and knowing where you want to go.
Thank you. Secretary Goodman?
Well, again, pick up the phone, give us a call. You might want to do a quick scan of the website to, as you may have gathered, there's a bit of overlap sometimes between state programs and between state and federal programs. So you may want to do a quick scan and make sure that we're the right agency for you. And if we are, if you have questions as to whether we're the right agency, you just pick up the phone and give us a call. That contact information is listed on the, you can email us, you can call us, you can whatever. It's monitored, our inbox is monitored all the time, and we'll get back with you and try to point you in the right direction. We frequently wind up sending people to economic development, or sending people to an ad district, or sending people elsewhere. But just pick up the phone and call first and see what we have to offer, and we'll see if you fit into one of those niches. And if you don't, we'll maybe call Hilda, or we'll call Commissioner Keene. We'll send you down the hopefully the right path. So call first.
State Director Legg?
Well, because the federal funding does have a great deal of information and specificity about who can apply and how they apply, and the process, I would check out the USDA website and just put the topic that you're interested in, telecommunications or wastewater treatment, something like that, and that'll direct you right to that. And I would read that, and I would look for examples of what other people have done to see if you see a commonality. And the other thing, I think those regulations, they're very burdensome, they're very technical. But if you can, if you're having insomnia for 2 or 3 nights, try to read a little bit every night and get yourself to sleep, but just sort of get familiar with the lingo, because every agency and every government level has its own alphabet soup. And that can be very intimidating. So don't be, just know that that is how we communicate, and spend a little time doing some background reading and research. And then as both of my co-panelists have said, pick up the phone and make the phone call, because I think that's the way then that you can find more quickly, yes, we'd love to talk to you more, or we really can't help you in that we have no program for it. Or they may, if you get a hold of a community facilities person, they may say, I think I can get you better information if I give you to one of my colleagues in the business program. So I would do my research on the internet through the website, and then I would make the phone call.
Thank you, State Director Legg. It's amazing to hear the resounding commonality among your. It's a beautiful thing to see state government so open to wanting people to give them a them what they're working on so they can really provide them with that customized technical assistance. And I think another thing I really picked up in your responses, which is really lovely to see, is that coordination across departments. You don't always see that in every state government. So the fact that you all are also well connected and are pretty well versed with one another's programs to direct folks to the right path is just a really great way to break down common barriers to funding opportunities for organizations looking to tap into these things. So we thank you for kind of building that infrastructure amongst you all to get folks to the places that they need to be. So at this time, I'm going to check to see if there are any questions for our panelists. One of the things I wanted to flag that I am seeing in the chat box, people are like, how do we contact you? How do we pick up the phone? How do we reach you? So I do see that Jeffrey has provided some contact information for audience members. So go ahead and take a screenshot or copy that in order to get in contact with our panelists staff working on these various funding opportunities. So one of the questions that I'm seeing right now is for State Director Hilda Legg. Are recreational projects that increase tourism revenue eligible for USDA funds, and could they be in the future?
If they are, if it is managed by a local government as a tourism entity, or if it is a not-for-profit entity, then we would look through them through the community facilities. Sometimes the problems with the tourism, if they only get a portion of grant and then they have to take out a loan, is there a revenue stream that is going to be able for them to pay that loan back? You know, are there enough tourists coming? Are there fees attached? What kind of, and they have to treat it like a, you can't just say, oh, I've got this, you know, beautiful scenic place, I'm going to do da, 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 da. I mean, you really have to have thought through the process and have your financials in place and know what you expect to bring in revenue, know what you expect to have to outgo in building it or redoing it, whatever. So it really becomes a business venture with that tourism industry that you need to be very thoughtful about because remember, from both the state actually and from us both, we are investing your tax dollar back into that community. So we have to be very diligent about making sure we're not just willy-nilly, or I like that tourism director, so I'm going to give them, you know, $200,000. It just doesn't work that way. Well, number one, we have to follow the rules and guidelines. But number two, we're always conscious about the hardworking people of this country who pay their taxes that then it gets sent back to us, whether it's at the state or the federal. The one thing I thought of after that a while ago, we were talking about for those grants that are competitive, where you compete against either your fellow folks in the Commonwealth or whether you're going up to national and competing, is like, don't give up. We've had distance learning telemedicine that's gone 3 years. They keep refining it. We'll say, you'll get a letter back and say, you didn't do this, or you left out that. And so remember, in that kind of competitive situation, we always have more applications than we have money. And I'd say Secretary Goodman and Commissioner Keene feel the same way. So at some point when you are in a competitive grant situation and you're looking at, 250 applications for distance learning telemedicine, you can only find 116 of them. Let's say, you have got to go through those. You've got to eliminate them. So when an application is incomplete, doesn't have something filled out, doesn't have something attached, and it doesn't matter if you forgot it or you didn't see it or you meant to and the computer didn't do it. If it's not attached, that's a reason for that grant reviewer to say, whoop, so that one goes back. And so we all live and learn, and sometimes those mistakes will cost us a year, but if the funding comes back and you're still in that place, you go forward the next year. So yesterday on the Community Connect, Mr. Gabbard said they've been turned down 2 or 3 times. So that's one thing I would say is completeness and attention to detail and application is very important. Don't give up if you don't get it the first time that you try. Try to learn from that. Look at who did get it, make a phone call and say, what did you do that made, and make that connection and then revamp yours and go again. But I may have lost where you asked me that question getting off on this, but hopefully that was additional help anyway.
That was helpful. And then Secretary, yes, please.
Mieka, I just wanted to say in response to the recreational project question, increasing tourism, that in the AML pilot project, assuming we get funded again next year, that tourism projects are frequently pitched as part of eligible projects. So that's one you can take a look at on the website or keep an eye out. Starting March or April of next year, we should start gearing up for an application process for that. But recreational projects that increase tourism revenue would be eligible to apply for those grants. Now, whether or not they pass muster and get selected is a different story, but they are eligible.
Secretary Goodman, and if I might add, Commissioner Keene, I believe the area development program would also entertain those sorts of projects that increase recreational tourism. So that would be another potential funding opportunity there.
Yeah, there's. I just want to make everybody aware there's something new that's happening in the mountains that I'm really excited about concerning recreational trails, and it's the Kentucky Mountain Regional Recreational Authority. That is going to be exciting to watch that develop. This is their first year. They've had it in West Virginia for years. It's a trail that goes through the mountains, and people pay to ride on it. And they build trailheads, what they call, and the trailheads produce hotels and restaurants and different things like that, and become many economic development engines in the mountains of tourism. So we're real excited to see how that takes off.
Thank you. And one of the things that was coming out in the responses that were just being given is that I would love to more formally ask, what are some of the kind of common mistakes or biggest mistakes that you all see when folks are submitting grant applications to your offices, just so the folks here can avoid those? We can start with Secretary Goodman. Do you mind taking a stab at that?
Not at all. We see incomplete applications. We see people who have not thought their projects through completely. We have a whole staff who stand ready to help you and to ask pertinent questions and to help you put your application together, but you need to answer every single question. The other thing they need to do, of course, again, is to contact us first. There's nothing worse than you getting all geared up, filling out the application, and then us having to reject it for some reason or another. So please just make that phone call first.
Thank you. State Director Legg, any other kind of common mistakes, big mistakes you see in applications?
Generally, what we would see in our competitive applications would be just the omission of something, inadvertently missing a deadline, inadvertently leaving something not attached to the electronic filing, or just not having paid really good attention to what the purpose of the funding was intent. So again, I think the research, the conversations, and then just attention to detail, filling in the blanks. Don't leave the budget out. In those cases, you can't. Good competitive applications are where there is competition in that application. Don't ever think you are going to just innocently omit something because you don't want to put it down or you think it might reflect bad. I mean, the folks who have the responsibility for reviewing those take it very, very seriously. So just, make sure you just check all the boxes, fill in all the blanks, give it your very best effort, and pay attention to detail. So I think that's what I would say. We mentioned you're talking about the tourism a while ago. I wanted to mention the Appalachian Wildlife Foundation project that's down in Bell and Harlan County. So that would be a tourism type initiative that we've been involved in.
Thank you. I want to just make sure I am being mindful. Keene, did you have something to add for that question?
We have a lot of times people will make just human errors with their budget. They'll just say, okay, the project's going to be $60,000, but I've committed $40,000, and you got to just go back and make sure all your numbers add up, because that can get you. We see that a lot.
I agree. And, I work with the Appalachian Regional Commission. I review grants. All that you all have shared are things that I've seen come across my desk. I think one thing that I often seen is folks, you only have a limited amount of space to describe what your project is. You're in the weeds of your project every day, so you know why you did this project, why it's strategic, why the rationale makes sense, but you don't articulate that quite in your application. And I'm like, I don't live in your community. I need to know why this is important and why it's impactful. So sometimes I think it's really important for applicants to look for someone outside of their organization to proofread their grant application before full submission, because they'll be able to identify the gaps that you would naturally fill in your mind because you're doing this every day. So that's a pro tip for folks out there. I want to be looking at our Q&A questions. I see here we have a question. As the chair for my college's sustainability team, I'm concerned with this region's inability to process plastics to help develop this area. Maybe one or two of the panelists have a response for this question.
ARC region, and they wanted to start a repurposing of plastic plant or recycling. We probably going to do a grant for buying the equipment and things like that through the ARC. That might be an example.
So I guess my question would be, are they talking about turning it into a business model, or is this something, again, that the community would put an effort onto to recycle and send out? So in both, that depends on what their idea is, but if it fits the guidelines of a community project that's going to make that community a better place to live, and the elected officials can all agree on it and support it, then certainly we would look at trying to help fund it. If it's a business model, then we'd want to look at a business plan for it. But it wouldn't be eliminated by any other means other than just, is it a good business model, or is it something the community is behind?
That is extremely helpful. And I want to encourage folks to go ahead and enter their questions in the Q&A. I don't want to monopolize all of the questions to the panelists. We do have about 5 or 6 minutes left in our session. I think one of the questions I would love to pose to any of the panelist members are, there are a number of different types of strategies that folks can kind of feature in their grant application to achieve their outcome. So sometimes folks can go with the tried and true, things that have been tested and tried in other places and successful, or they might try to do something that is just now burgeoning, something that's more of a promising practice, more cutting edge, more new. So just from you all's perspective in the number of applications that hit your desk, what would you recommend to someone who's applying to any one of your grant opportunities? Should they lean towards the tried and true? Should they go on a limb with the new cutting edge strategies? If they are to do the cutting edge strategy, what are some of the additional pieces of information you would want to see in a grant application that's trying to do something out of the box?
Jump in there on that one. I think we want to see a healthy mix of both. I think with our AML pilots, we have some people who have thought outside the box. Somebody came to us with a drone project and a couple of years ago, and that one got funded. And so we're really anxious to hear what people are thinking about. And I think if it's got community support, I think it's something we'll look favorably on, but you do still have to meet the technical requirements. So don't think so far outside the box that you can't meet the technical requirements. So.
I think that's well said. She really hit the nail on the head there. Obviously, from my perspective, I really like to see us take advantage of the technology that's there today and be innovative in terms of problem solving for our local communities. But I do, again, you've got to look at the intent, in our case, of the law and the regulation and the funding requirements that are there, and hit those. But I don't think we have to do, in fact, I'd like to see some of our water and wastewater systems becoming much more technically savvy, management more, SCADA systems, some of those things. We'd like to see that. It just becomes an issue of then what does it cost and how does it increase the ratepayer? And, the political reality of those kind of projects that are community oriented is, you could be really high tech and put a bunch of money, and we could, give you grant and loan money to go for that. But in the process of that loan, you're probably going to raise the rate of the sewer bill or water bill, whatever. And so oftentimes when you have the political element within our counties, they don't want that. They don't want somebody to have their water bill go up, $10 or whatever that might be. Sewer, we have a huge demand for wastewater management. I see Secretary Goodman shaking her head, but it's a very expensive endeavor. And so how do you get those who appoint the water board or, the entity that oversees that infrastructure, to be supportive? The other day we were in West Kentucky and it was a fairly substantial grant and loan, couple of million loan and 2 million grant or something. But the problem was the previous leadership in that community had failed to deal with the water system, and it had just become more and more antiquated. And as a result, they were really forced at this point, the new leadership was, to have to take out the loan, have to raise the rates and do all of that. So I don't think we can ignore the political reality of what the leaders in the community, and again, we talked about that community support, really does need to be around your project. And then I think there also has got to be a bit of community education in that. And I really recommend this in the world of broadband, because technology changes so quickly. Is it Wi-Fi? Is it 3G? Is it 5G? Is it whatever it's going to be? And it's a very difficult industry to get a hold of. And then by the time we do and think about what we want to deploy, then you've got the geography of Eastern Kentucky, et cetera. So I think the fact is that we do have to really do our homework when we're looking at these projects, and we really have to educate our public about why this is costing so much money. Or if you want this new gee whiz, innovative, out of the box thinking for your community that puts it on the map from an economic development standpoint, which is all great. Just make sure that you hold enough meetings to educate the populace, educate the voters. Here's what this costs. Here's how we think we can get there, but bring them in as a community, because it doesn't matter how great that idea is if the local officials do not have the support to go along with it and raise some of the local money that'll probably be required. It's in some way, it may not have a very good chance of succeeding. So I'm all about involving the community and putting together citizen committees to help you deal with a challenge or think through what would it mean if we went and tried to put broadband all over our rural county, and what would that cost us, and what would that look like? Those are very complicated projects, and they need a lot of consideration, but don't ignore the public, because they are the taxpayer again.
Good point, State Director Legg. And just looking at the time we have, maybe about had one question come in as you were speaking, State Director Legg, maybe just a few seconds on this. When you review applications, what are the indicators of public support that you use?
Well, obviously, if there is a match, which generally there is, then that money has to be put up, and somebody from that public arena has to make that effort. Often one of our best, strongest pieces in a Community Connect grant or a distance learning application is when we have letters from the school system or the medical facility or a family who lost their loved one because there wasn't an ambulance, or those kinds of things. So that local engagement and that local letter writing and support writing, it's always helpful. Now, it never hurts if you have your congressmen or your senators write a letter of support, but it really the thing that makes the biggest impact is how badly that school needs that connectivity to a college or university to bring in advanced classes. And how does that local principal or superintendent or student feel about that? I missed out on this because I didn't have access to that class. Those are the kinds of things that impact a grant reader is mine, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, State Director Legg. It is 2:29, so we are counting down the seconds until we are pushed back into the main room. I want to thank our esteemed panelists for sharing such great insights on how to access grant funding opportunities. I'm sure we can follow up later to make sure that you all have their contact information so that you can dig in a little deeper with each of their offices to tap into their funding opportunities. I'm Mieka Sanderson with ARC. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you, Secretary Goodman, Commissioner Legg.